Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, for joining our special ceremony for the 12th TCTAP Award 2022 Master of Masters. My name is Sung Jong Bak, and it's my great honor as the chairman of the Cardiovascular Research Foundation to present this award. Master of Masters Award is granted to the recognized expert who has made a remarkable dedication to the field of intervention cardiology and the growth of TCTAP over a significant period of time. Since 2011, we have given the award to the 11 masters, and I would like to express my heartfelt appreciation for their hard work and accomplishment in the field on behalf of all cardiologists and TCTAP committees. And now, the winner of 12th Master of Masters Award will be announced.
You know, I have a distinct memory of watching you do some of your first cases at Stanford. That was in the early days of IVUS. And I remember saying to Peter Fitz, this guy is some kind of a prodigy.
The prodigy was born in Hong Kong in 1958. As a child, he loved to learn how things are put together and how things work. He enjoyed reading an encyclopedia that explains the difference between nuclear fusion and nuclear fission. He learned about medicine through his older sister, who was in medical school. He liked to quiz her about various pathology of the human body, such as TB infection of the knee. In high school and in college, he liked how fluid flows and how systems work. He was drawn to interventional cardiology since he can fix broken pipes and damaged valves. He earned his bachelor's degree from University of California, Berkeley, and his medical doctorate from Harvard Medical School. He completed his internship and residency at Massachusetts General Hospital and joined a cardiology fellowship with Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School in Boston, Massachusetts. He led the Division of Cardiovascular Medicine at Stanford University School of Medicine for so many years, and currently, he is leading the field as Li Ka-shing, Professor in Cardiology and Medical Director at Stanford Healthcare. Dr. Young has been contributing hugely to TCTAP for more than 2 decades, sharing his knowledge to the participants all around the world. By participating as moderator, panelist, and lecturer, he has been inspiring many clinicians and scientists in the field of cardiology. He has been publishing more than 300 papers covering the topics of transcatheter aortic valve replacement, obstructive coronary artery disease, percutaneous coronary intervention, intravascular ultrasound, and so on. Not only that, but he also published books that could be a one-of-a-kind textbook for fellows in training and practicing interventionalists.
I know Professor Young for more than 20 years, back to the early times when interventional cardiology was a challenge. I admire the knowledge, the simplicity, and the humbleness of Alan.
You added so much to the field of interventional cardiology, and it has been my pleasure and my honor to have been in your side during the last decade, learning from you and your vision.
I first met you when you were a cardiology fellow at the Brigham in the late 1980s. I was your attending physician, and I'm proud to say I also became your research mentor. The audience should know that I, as well as many of my faculty colleagues, thought of you as the best cardiology fellow who worked at the Brigham over many years in the cath lab.
Alan has been a mentor and a friend. When I came down in the early 90s, I was not even close to be as skilled as Alan, but he helped me. He was always there if I needed a lending hand, needed how to, progress on a specific coronary artery, or even take care of a particular patient with cardiovascular disease.
Congratulations, Alan.
Dr. Young has been instructed academically in Harvard, Brigham and Women's Hospital, and Stanford University for more than 20 years.
Worldwide, the interventional community knows of you as a superb clinician with amazing technical skills and an unparalleled fund of knowledge, who's also a gifted educator and researcher. But few have had the good fortune of working side by side and learning from you for the past 26 years like I have. You always put your junior colleagues first and promote them ahead of yourself.
I've always found Alan to be a very clear thinker and an outstanding physician educator who helps to put our therapies and our choices into context. He's been a great bridge from the United States to all of Asia for many of these years, and through that has to the dissemination of tremendous skills and knowledge throughout the world.
Hey Alan, sending you a sincere congratulations on receiving the TCTAP Award 2022 Master of Masters Award. As you know, the TCTAP committee has decided to award you this year, as you have been attending TCTAP for more than 20 years now, sharing your expertise and experience with the peer clinicians worldwide and contributing hugely to the field of cardiology by bringing new insights through your research, especially in TAVR, FFR, and many various cutting-edge issues and more. You are a good friend of mine. We have been sharing lots of good memories for the last 20 years. I hope to keep our friendship and mentorship for a long time in the future too. Congratulations again, Alan.
Dr. Young has been devoting himself to the development of the field of cardiology in every aspect possible. However, family was always his priority.
Hi Dad, congratulations on your Masters of the Masters Award. Your dedication to your work and your care for your patients are truly inspiring to us. You are our role model and we always look to you for advice and guidance. We always know you'll be there for us even when we're all miles away from each other.
Thank you for being an amazing father and lending us your undying support. While we know you work extremely hard while taking calls in the middle of the night, you still get a good laugh out of us.
We are so proud of all the accomplishments you have achieved and your commitment to the advancement in the field of cardiology. Your passion for clinical care is evident and truly inspiring.
Congratulations. We love you, Dad.
Congratulations, Dr. Young.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be named the 12th Master of the Masters at TCTAP. I wish I could be there with you personally to celebrate such a momentous occasion. Let me share my screen. As you can see, I'm really following the footsteps of 11 giants in interventional cardiology. I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to work with many of them through the decades, especially here in the middle, Dr. Spencer King. Spencer and I edited 2 editions of the interventional cardiology textbooks. It was a lot of work, but at the same time, very rewarding, get to know a lot of young, upcoming faculties. We were also back-to-back chairmen in charge of writing questions for the American Interventional Cardiology Board. This is the exam we have to take to be board certified to practice interventional cardiology in the United States. Again, a lot of work, but with Spencer's help, we actually did a very, very thorough job over the years. I'd like to thank my mentors, Dr. Peter Gans. He has taught me how to cath and also how to do cutting-edge research during my training in Boston. He also collaborated with me for many years after as well. Thank you. Dr. Steve Osserly. He recruited me from Boston to Stanford and subsequently taught me many aspects of how to be a leader. Dr. Peter Fitzgerald. He has enlightened me with intravascular ultrasound, as well as the art of invention. Dr. Simon Stutzer. He has endowed professorship for me, but more importantly, he taught me how to perform real rotational atherectomy and how to perform mitral balloon valvuloplasty. Thank you, Simon. They all remain dear friends for life. I'd like to thank Stanford University and Dean Phil Pizzo, Dean Lloyd Minor, and the professoriates who have supported me in my clinical work as well as my research work through the years. Mr. Li Ka-shing, on the left here, has been my life mentor. He's a visionary in business and in philanthropy. And he has basically been tutoring me on many aspects of life and has been supporting me through thick or thin. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Of course, I have to thank my Stanford Interventional Cardiology colleagues, Dr. David Lee, Dr. Bill Fearon, Dr. Jennifer Trumbull. I taught them what I know, and in turn, they taught me back many times over. Thank you. Last but not least is my family, Eileen, Chloe, Kara, Tristan. Without their support, I would not have been able to accomplish any of my achievements in the last 30 years. Thank you, Eileen, for having my back, especially during the formidable years of my academic career. And obviously, you have had my family's back all this time. This bronze bust will be the most treasured prize I have received, since it represents many years of sharing, experience, and camaraderie with many of you. It brings back many good memories, and thank you again for giving me this honor. What I'd like to do in the next several minutes is really give you a short lecture on my 30 years journey in the evolution of Asia-Pacific interventional cardiology. Maybe a better term is talk about sharing of knowledge and art of education. When I first came to Stanford from Boston, I know obviously the West Coast is so much closer to Asia Pacific, and therefore one of my earliest goals is to establish collaboration with my colleagues in that region. Again, from 1993 to 2002, the first decade is really before PowerPoints. We actually have actual glass slides that we could bring, and before DVD. So we actually have cinefilms. We have to bring many cans of films to share our experience. I wanted to tell you specifically some of the really important symposium we put together, the Stanford Asia's Cardiovascular Symposium, as well as the MedTech. The first Stanford Asia Cardiovascular Symposium was held in Hong Kong, naturally, because I was from Hong Kong and we felt that that would be a good launching place. As you can see from this flyer, that we have the heart in kanji on the right, as well as the map of Asia Pacific, because we felt that this is such an important region for interventional cardiology. We want to visit every country in that area. I have the pleasure of traveling at that time with Dr. Victor Zhao, who was the chief of cardiovascular medicine at Stanford at the time. And he subsequently becomes chief of medicine at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, following the footsteps of Dr. Eugene Bromwald, and then the chancellor at Duke University, and more recently now the president of the National Academy of Medicine in Washington, D.C. With the pleasure of bringing a lot of public health issues to Hong Kong, talking about prevention, talking about cholesterol, talking about smoking, and I think we made an important impact of how people can look at heart disease being something that is preventable and curable. The symposium itself is quite innovative in vascular surgery, with all 3 disciplines and case base. We actually shows actual cinefilms with the projector that we shipped along. And we have discussion with both visiting faculty as well as local expertise, bringing the local sort of flavor or the local decision path, given resources and so forth. These were decision-making discussion and interesting case discussion. I think looking back, we felt that this was actually the birth of the heart team concept 30 years ago. So we were quite ahead of time. This was part of the team. Dr. Chris Zarins is the chief of vascular surgery in the red tie here. He subsequently started a company called HeartFlow, which measures CT-FFR, as you know. We also have Dr. Bruce Wright kneeling down. He is actually the chief of cardiothoracic surgery, one of the pioneer of cardiac surgery and the first person in the world to perform heart-lung transplant. After Hong Kong, we made a stop in Beijing, China, because many of us were interested where does interventional cardiology stands in 1994 in Beijing. We visited Fuwei Hospital, which is the National Heart Center, for a one-day mini symposium. We learned that at that time, actually, Fuwei Hospital has performed a total of 400 PCI to date in September of 1994. We certainly felt that this is a hospital we can develop collaboration with and friendship with, and subsequently it bore fruits over the next 30 years. As you know, we make friends not with an institution, but with the physician colleagues. Dr. Gao Rinlin is actually can be considered the father of Chinese interventional cardiology. We remained friends and collaborated for many years. Dr. Yan Yujing was a young man at that time, but subsequently becomes a very important leader in Chinese interventional cardiology. He has visited us for 6 months after that 1994 symposium to further understand American interventional cardiology, how it works and how the hospital works. Thank you, Dr. Gao and Dr. Yan. Subsequently, we had a symposium in Kuala Lumpur, 1995, in Phuket, 1996, in Darwin in 1997, and Manila in 1998. We were very glad that we were able to develop a lot of relationship with local physicians and also share a lot of knowledge we can bring to the table. After the last symposium, we decided that we should not carry any further because my co-moderator, Dr. Stephen Osley, has left for Boston. And we felt that at that time, the Asia Pacific symposium scene has grown so much that I think we felt that there's no additional value we can bring to the table at that point. However, there's another symposium in that era that is extremely important. This is the TCTAP symposium sponsored by Medtronic. This is actually at that time the only formal training for PCI in China, meaning that there's obviously informal training. But we felt that we could bring some formality to this process, even though it's very short, but we felt that we could contribute significantly to their training. A 3-day lectures and case presentation series. Each time 3 faculty go to the training, including myself, Ross Parbury from Australia, Pat Coleman from California, Ted Bass from Florida, and George Vetrek from Washington, D.C. We held about 10 to 15 sessions over 4 years. Each session includes 15 to 20 Chinese interventional cardiologists. And we'll discuss equipment selection, fundamentals of imaging, ACS, DES, management of thrombus, SVG treatment, and management of complication, the most important of all. We also then followed by visits to these physicians' base hospitals. And we actually visited myself over 30 hospitals over subsequent years to do cases with these physicians. So bringing both lectures, case review, and live in-person training to this process. The next decade, I would sort of classify 2003 to 2012, I made about 83 trips to Asia Pacific. But this is the time of the golden era of sort of the blossoming of Asia Pacific Interventional Cardiology meeting. Foremost is the Asia Angioplasty Summit, Beyond Angiography, TCTAP as it's called later on. The CIT, which is your Chinese Interventional Therapeutics, My Life, which is Malaysia Life, TTT, which is Taiwan Transcatheter Therapeutics, Asia Pacific Society of Interventional Cardiology meetings, as well as Hong Kong STENTs. All these meetings contribute tremendously to the training and education of the next generation and next generation of interventional cardiology in this region. Dear to my heart is Angioplasty Summit. I had the pleasure and honor to attend the meeting consecutively since 1999, even through the SARS years. I learned tremendous amount of, for example, in left main stenting from Dr. S.J. Park and his team, and I have the pleasure of bringing some new technologies, for example, bifurcation stent to Korea for clinical trial. So again, we also enjoy a lot of social events. For example, we have played golf in Jeju Island together with Dr. S.J. Park and also Dr. Teddy Chen of the Orbis Niche Company, as well as Dr. Richard Ng of Singapore. The third decade, from 2012 to 2022, and about an additional 80 trips to Asia Pacific for me. But this is the era of really now formalizing training programs and supported by philanthropy such as the Chen Foundation, resulting in many bilateral exchange and fellows training. The Chen Foundation comprises of colleagues from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from South Korea, from the Netherlands, and from Germany. And each year, for a few times, we were able to sit down and plan out how we actually can foster training for the Asia Pacific region. Over time, obviously, we have fellows from Australia, we have fellows from Japan, we have fellows from Hong Kong, we have many fellows, and obviously we enjoy still playing golf a little bit. So this is really what becomes a very personal and long-lasting relationship we develop for the next generation. Also important is that we see our fellows grow up. The early generation fellows have their own family and see their kids grow up. This is Moto Hayase with his lovely wife and daughters. This is Eric Chen from Hong Kong with his wife and young daughter. And also Patricia Han, one of our earlier trainees from Hong Kong with his son and daughter. So again, a great pleasure to see our fellows both developing as sort of important contributing interventional cardiologists, and also an opportunity to meet their families and see how they actually foster academic career as well as personal life. Most recently, we have Dr. Junming An from Asan Medical Center visiting us at Stanford, the new hospital in 2021. It's really a pleasure to have him there, even though we have COVID. Unfortunately, wasn't able to do too much socially, but at least I think we have a good opportunity to collaborate. Well, unfortunately, no one would have expected the global severe impact we have experienced with COVID, putting a pause in pursuit of knowledge sharing. Hopefully, by the end of this year, 2022, we will be able to open up further and reestablish our personal connection in interventional cardiology. So to summarize the 30 years as I see it in terms of my participation in interventional cardiology in Asia Pacific, the first decade is really talking about how to do the procedures, the know-how, the nuts and bolts. The next decade is really the outcome of our procedures. We do a lot of randomized clinical trials to understand what works and what does not work. And finally, the last decade is we ask ourselves now, why do we perform some of these procedures? Do we really are treating the angiogram, or are we treating physiology? And that brings me back to my original research path, which I'm very proud of, which started in Boston under my mentor, Dr. Peter Gans. As you know, in 1983, we started to understand nitric oxide as released by the endothelium is a very important molecule that regulates vascular function. And Furchgott and his colleagues won the Nobel Prize in 1998 for this discovery. But in 1996, Dr. Gans was one of the earliest persons who really studied that in human. And he figured out that there's paradoxical vasoconstriction in coronaries that have endothelial dysfunction. And with normal endothelial function in normal vessel, the vessel actually vasodilate with the infusion of acetylcholine. And that becomes the subsequent gold standard of testing endothelial function. However, we didn't know what the physiological significance is of this endothelial dysfunction. And as a fellow, I was lucky enough to study how other stressors, for example, mental stress, when the vessel has atherosclerosis and therefore significant endothelial dysfunction, mental stress can cause actually vasoconstriction. So that's how actually sometimes when people have angina, when they have moderate coronary disease but endothelial dysfunction. We also show that you can reverse some of this endothelial dysfunction without changing the structure by lowering the cholesterol, and this function can be restored relatively quickly over 6 months, for example. We also study subsequently at Stanford the importance of how intimal thickening relate to endothelial dysfunction, meaning that the two are actually not necessarily related in a sense. If you have intimal thickening, but the risk factors are treated, you actually can have endothelial function that's normal. Subsequently, it's also true that if you have normal vessel, but abnormal factors such as high cholesterol, you still can have endothelial dysfunction. This is a very important concept that function and structure doesn't necessarily always go hand in hand. And therefore, it's important to understand this concept. And I think we learned it in a hard way by studying the bioabsorbable stents, meaning endothelial healing over bioabsorbable stents. But when underlying there's inflammation, the function is actually not normal. This is sort of what we studied in the early transplant population to understand this dichotomous function relationship between endothelial function and intimal thickening. One of my early fellows is very interested in coronary remodeling as well, as known as the Glycoff effect. We always thought it's a positive thing, meaning that it's good for the coronary to remodel to accommodate the building, the plaque buildup. But we also show that this could be a double-edged sword because the presence of metallic proteases, macrophages to help with coronary remodeling actually can cause plaque instability by causing harm to the fibrous cap and subsequently leading to thrombosis. So this was summarized in a very important article written by Michael and our collaborator in the Netherlands. I'm especially proud of Dr. Bill Fearon. Early on, we studied together and tried to figure out how to study resistant function. We actually developed this ratio called IMR, and we're able to study that in STEMI patients, showing that if you have a lot of clot in the small vessel, you have a very abnormal IMR. Obviously, the FAME study 123 was very important, and I have the pleasure of being able to participate in these trials as well as raise funds to carry forward the FAME-3 study, for example. In this study, obviously comparing fractional reserve guided PCI as compared to bypass surgery was published earlier this year in the New England Journal. My other colleague and previous trainee, Dr. Jennifer Trommel, has applied a lot of coronary physiology in studying patients with normal coronaries and studied sex differences in this particular group of patients. And also when myocardial bridge is present, how does that actually impact the proximal plaque behavior? And I think she has developed a very impressive, comprehensive assessment of myocardial bridge and ischemia with no evidence of coronary disease patient in NOCA patients. And she has published it in several articles outlining the sort of the invasive assessment of these group of patients. I think, looking at this drawer of all the different meetings, Leonards I have had collected over the years, the 3 decades have been really amazing. My journey of education and knowledge is remarkable, and more importantly, the friendships I've established is much to be treasured. I always thought for many years that the world is at our fingertips because it is so connected and so shared. It felt so small at times. But the last few years have taught us that nothing can be taken for granted, and we need to treasure all the moments. So therefore, thank you again for this incredible honor to be named the Master of the Masters. And I hope I have the opportunity to visit and share my experience further with you in the coming years. Thank you.